Beyond good and evil, Friedrich Nietzsche imagined standing at the edge of a vast canyon, peering into depths where familiar landmarks disappear into shadow. You've spent your life navigating by certain moral compass points, good and evil, right and wrong, virtue and vice. Yet here you discover that the very ground beneath these certainties might be less solid than you believed. What would it mean to venture beyond these ancient guideposts, beyond the comfortable boundaries of inherited wisdom? And what might you find in that strange territory where traditional morality no longer holds sway? Friedrich Nietzsche invites you into precisely this unsettling, yet exhilarating terrain in his exploration of what lies beyond conventional notions of good and evil. His central insight challenges the very foundations upon which Western moral thinking has stood for centuries, that our cherished values, compassion, humility, self-sacrifice, might not represent eternal truths, but rather the particular historical creations of a specific type of human consciousness. This isn't merely academic philosophy, it's a fundamental questioning of how you understand yourself and your place in the world. In our current era of moral complexity, where traditional institutions and beliefs face constant scrutiny, Nietzsche's radical examination becomes more relevant than ever. How do you create meaning and direction when the old certainties no longer provide clear answers? The heart of Nietzsche's critique centers on what he perceives as a profound historical shift in human values. He traces the development of two fundamentally different moral orientations, one he calls master morality, and another he terms slave morality. Master morality, as Nietzsche describes it, emerged from strength and affirmation. It was the moral system of those who felt empowered to create values from their own sense of excellence and nobility. These individuals didn't ask whether something was universally right or wrong. They asked whether it expressed their highest potential and greatest strength. In contrast, slave morality arose from a different source entirely, from the experience of oppression, resentment, and powerlessness. This moral system, which Nietzsche argues became dominant through Christianity's influence on Western culture, transforms weakness into virtue. Humility becomes more valuable than pride, suffering more noble than joy, and self-denial more righteous than self-assertion. You begin to see how this analysis might apply to your own moral intuitions. When you feel guilty about pursuing your ambitions, or when you automatically assume that self-sacrifice is morally superior to self-development, you might be encountering the psychological residue of this slave morality that Nietzsche believed had shaped Western consciousness. But Nietzsche's exploration extends far beyond historical analysis into something more fundamental, his concept of the will to power. This isn't the crude desire for dominance that the phrase might suggest. Instead, it represents the basic drive toward growth, expansion, and self-overcoming that he saw as the essential force behind all life. The will to power emerges in the artist who struggles to perfect her craft, in the thinker who pushes beyond comfortable assumptions, in anyone who seeks to become more than they currently are. It's the force that drives you to question, to grow, to transform yourself rather than simply accepting things as they are. This will to power stands in stark contrast to what Nietzsche saw as the life-denying tendencies of traditional morality, where conventional ethics often emphasizes controlling desires, accepting limitations, and finding peace through resignation. Nietzsche's vision celebrates the ongoing struggle to expand your capabilities and deepen your experience. You might recognize this tension in your own life, the pull between security and growth, between accepting who you are and striving to become who you might be. From this foundation, Nietzsche develops his most provocative concept, the Übermensch, often translated as Superman or Overman. This isn't a call for biological superiority or political dominance, but rather a vision of human beings who have moved beyond the need for external moral authorities. The Übermensch creates values rather than discovering them, affirms life rather than seeking escape from it, and takes responsibility for meaning-making rather than relying on inherited traditions or divine commands. The Übermensch represents a profound psychological and spiritual transformation, the capacity to live authentically without the safety net of absolute moral rules. You might consider what this would mean in your own life. Could you make decisions based on your own carefully developed judgment, rather than automatic adherence to social expectations? Could you take full responsibility for the consequences of your choices, without blaming external circumstances or seeking comfort in the idea that you're following universal laws? This connects to perhaps Nietzsche's most haunting thought experiment, eternal recurrence. He asks you to imagine that you would have to live your exact life, with all its joys and sorrows, triumphs and failures, infinite times over. Would you affirm this prospect? The test isn't whether your life has been perfect, but whether you can embrace it fully enough that you would welcome its eternal repetition. This becomes a profound measure of whether you're truly living according to your own highest values, or merely going through the motions dictated by others. In our contemporary context, these ideas take on fresh urgency. You live in an era where traditional religious and cultural authorities carry less automatic weight, where moral questions seem increasingly complex, and where individual freedom comes with the burden of individual responsibility for creating meaning. Nietzsche's insights illuminate both the liberation and the challenge of this situation. Without ready-made answers about how to live, you face the exhilarating and terrifying prospect of authentic self-creation. Consider how his analysis applies to modern dilemmas. When you struggle with career choices, do you default to what seems most acceptable to others, or do you ask what would most fully express your own developing capacities? When you encounter moral disagreements, do you retreat into absolute positions, or do you engage with the complex work of understanding different value systems? When you face setbacks, do you seek someone to blame, or do you ask how these experiences might contribute to your ongoing growth and understanding? The key insight you might carry from this exploration is that moral maturity involves moving beyond simple rule-following toward the more demanding work of conscious value creation. This doesn't mean abandoning ethical consideration for others, but rather taking responsibility for developing your own ethical framework through careful thought and authentic engagement with life's complexities. The second crucial realization is that authentic living requires embracing rather than fleeing from the fundamental uncertainty and responsibility that comes with human freedom. But this raises a haunting question that extends far beyond academic philosophy. In a world where you must create your own values rather than inherit them, how do you distinguish between growth that leads toward greater wisdom and compassion, and change that merely reflects self-indulgence or spiritual confusion? As you settle into this question, you might find both challenge and comfort in recognizing that you're already engaged in this process of value creation, whether consciously or not. Every choice you make, every priority you establish, every relationship you nurture reflects your ongoing work of deciding what matters most. Perhaps the path beyond good and evil isn't about abandoning moral consideration entirely, but about approaching it with greater honesty, creativity, and personal responsibility. In this light, Nietzsche's radical challenge becomes less a call to moral chaos and more an invitation to moral maturity, the difficult but rewarding work of becoming fully conscious creators of the values by which you choose to live.